Chapter 19. The 13th Pearl. The newspaper office? Ned asked, puzzled. Yes, Nancy replied. I believe that the real Mrs. Rossmeyer is still in Europe, and that the one who was at the party is an imposter. Ned was amazed. You mean she just borrowed the house? Yes, Nancy replied. I didn't realize that you had never seen a picture of Tanya Rossmeyer, Ned commented. Unfortunately, I haven't, but the Gazette must have plenty of them. When they arrived at the newspaper office, a young man at the front counter asked, You wish to place an ad? It's too late for the morning paper. That has just been put to bed. Nancy and Ned looked puzzled, and he explained. That means the forms have been locked in place and the paper put on the press. Nancy spoke up. We didn't come about an ad. There may be a big story breaking for you people. May I see some photographs of Mrs. Tanya Rossmeyer? The young man, who said to call him Jim, went to an inner room to look through the files. A few minutes later, he came back with a folder containing several photographs of the well-known socialite. Here she is, Jim said. I hear the woman's loaded. He grinned. That means she has a lot of money. Nancy ignored his facetiousness. After she and Ned had looked at 3 different photographs of the striking brunette, who appeared to be in her late 30s, they were convinced that the woman at the party had indeed been an imposter. Ned thanked Jim, and the young couple left. When they were outside, Ned remarked, So that goddess was just a cheap fake. Yes. Suddenly Nancy thought of something else and turned back to the newspaper office. I wonder if there were any recent articles telling exactly where the real Mrs. Rossmeyer is, she said. Jim was surprised to see them again. Did you bring the big story you promised? He asked. Nancy smiled. Not yet. I'd like a little help first. Will you check recent papers to see if there have been any recent articles about Mrs. Rossmeyer? Jim went off and came back with a copy of the morning paper. Maybe there's something in here, he said. Nancy and Ned turned the pages and ran their fingers down the various columns. Suddenly Ned stopped. Look at this, he said, and he began to read aloud. Mrs. Tanya Rossmeyer of River Heights is giving a dinner party on Tuesday for Count and Countess Sorrentino. Nancy interrupted. Tuesday! That's today! Where is the item from? Paris, Ned replied. That settles it. Mrs. Rossmeyer is in Paris and not in River Heights. Is that the big story? Jim asked. Once more Nancy smiled enigmatically. No, but I believe you will have it very soon. Before the young man could ask further questions, Nancy and Ned raced from the newspaper office. Their next stop was police headquarters. They burst inside and told the officer on duty that a fake Mrs. Rossmeyer had borrowed the socialite's home and was having a big and very strange party there. What? The officer said. I'll get some men with squad cars to investigate at once. Nancy suggested that the policemen follow her and Ned. We've just come from the estate and know exactly where it is, she added. While the men were assembling, Nancy told the officer that she suspected the group who was at the estate were jewel thieves. They've probably robbed Mrs. Rossmeyer's house. Would you get in touch with my father and Chief McGinnis? I'm sure they'll want to come along. When the young sleuth and her companion reached the Rossmeyer mansion, they found to their dismay that it was in darkness. The last car of guests was just pulling away. It was not coming toward them, but going out a back service road. Let's follow it, Nancy urged Ned. Okay, but we'd better not get too close or the driver will become suspicious. The chase led beyond the borders of River Heights, and Nancy was worried. Would the police go back now and perhaps notify the state troopers to continue the hunt? Nancy said nothing to Ned, but she wished she had brought her own car with its CB radio. Ned had driven his car to her home, and she had seen no reason to make a switch. After they had traveled a good many miles, the driver ahead turned into a wooded area. The dirt road twisted and turned until it finally led to an encampment. The main house seemed to be a converted barn. For safety, Ned parked some distance away. He and Nancy jumped out and quietly but quickly hurried forward. They encountered no one, since the people ahead of them had already gone inside. Cautiously, the young people went up to the nearest window and peered in. They recognized many of the people who had been at the party. They were standing around, still in their ceremonial robes, but the scene was not solemn. The cultists were talking and laughing loudly. One of them put on a record, and they began to dance singly or in couples, going through strange gyrations. Presently, 2 men walked near the window, which was partially open. They were Mr. Campura and Benny, the slippery one, Caputi. Nancy and Ned dodged out of sight, but remained close enough to listen. Benny Caputi laughed raucously. "We certainly pulled that one off all right. Good thing those kids didn't see us and Rosina." "That's right," Campura said. "Praise to the Pearl and the lovely moon goddess." "Say, we brought back so much food. We'd better feed Moto," Benny said. Campura chuckled. "Which one?" "Not our Moto, of course. The sneaky little jeweler who caught on to us and is now sitting in the dungeon. We certainly have to decide what we'll do with him soon. I still think we should have gotten rid of him right away." Nancy and Ned looked at each other. Mr. Moto the jeweler was the prisoner of the cult people. But where was he? In the house or one of the other buildings? They wondered if the thieves had harmed him. Campura and Caputi were joined by a third man who snickered. "It's a good thing we locked up that girl and her boyfriend. The nerve of them to crash the party." The 3 men moved away from the window, and Nancy whispered to Ned, "They don't even know we've escaped." "And they don't know we were invited," Ned added. "I wonder who called you." Nancy admitted she had no idea. At that moment, 2 other men passed the window and stopped near it. One of them said, "We can't leave that girl and her boyfriend in the hallway forever. Early tomorrow morning, you go back and quietly unlock the doors." His companion grinned. "And give them some pearl soup." Both men laughed uproariously, but were interrupted by the goddess. She reprimanded them for their hilarity and suggested that everyone go to bed. "There's work to be done in the morning," she declared. "I have a new list of jewelry stores for you to work on." The woman clapped her hands. Everyone fell silent, and she commanded the cult members to retire to their rooms. Within minutes, everyone had left, and the lights were turned out. Nancy and Ned wondered where the police were. Had the River Heights men forgotten to notify them? Or had the replacements not been able to follow Ned's car? "Are you game to go inside the house and see if we can find a telephone to notify the police?" Nancy asked. "Yes. Let's see if we can locate a door that isn't locked." Not far from where they were standing was an open door. Nancy and Ned tiptoed inside. Before them was a flight of steps with another door at the top. Ned opened it, and they found themselves in a kitchen. It was in darkness, but a small flashlight Nancy pulled from her pocket illuminated their way to another door. It swung open noiselessly, and the two sleuths went into an elegantly furnished dining room. No telephone was in evidence. Nancy thought, perhaps Mrs. Rossmeyer keeps it hidden. The two young people proceeded through another door, and this time stood stock still, gaping in astonishment. They were in a small room with a large glass case in the middle of it. It stood on a pedestal, and in the center, swathed in purple velvet, was the form of a woman's neck and shoulders. A light in the top of the case shone on an exquisite pearl necklace draped over the form. Nancy counted the pearls. There were 12 on each side of a huge, magnificent center one with a slightly pinkish cast. Nancy and Ned were stunned. Was this the one stolen from the real Mrs. Rossmeyer? Was it the one her companion had brought to Mr. Moto for repairs? In front of the glass case, 3 figures in white hooded robes were kneeling on the floor. They remained in that position and gave no indication that they had seen or heard the young people. Every few seconds they glanced up at the necklace with adoring eyes. Nancy put her lips to Ned's ear. "We must get the police." The two retraced their steps through the dining room and kitchen and went outside. "Maybe the officers lost us and couldn't find this place," Ned suggested. "Why don't we walk up the road and wave them down?" Nancy agreed, and they started off. As they hurried along the dirt road, they were suddenly stopped by 2 men who appeared from the bushes and blocked their way like huge, looming shadows. Nancy and Ned stood frozen to the spot. Before they had a chance to think, they were tackled by the 2 men. As the young couple fought desperately, they smelled a strong, sweet odor coming from cloths that their attackers had shoved in their faces. Nancy and Ned blacked out. End of chapter 19.